the content that you create on your YouTube channel, when did you start actually putting it up there and making this a thing that you wanted to pursue as far as creating menswear related content about either clothes you wear or ideas you have about fashion and things like that? Like when did that happen and sort of what prompted you to even do it?
I started my YouTube channel about, I believe, 8 months ago. So what partly prompted me to do it was I was unemployed. And what happened during the pandemic was it kind of exposed to me that I was too reliant on one source of income. And so I thought one way that I could start to generate income in time, of course, I'm still not even monetized, but in time, one way that I could generate income is through having a YouTube channel. And so I started to ask myself, well, what do I know? And what is it that I'm passionate about? And what is it that I could learn more about? And I thought style is a great way to do it. And I'm obviously at that point, I had been for a couple of years building up my Instagram page and working on, different outfit shoots. So I thought, that was a very natural way to start making a YouTube channel. So that was primarily the motivation.
Okay. And then as far as the production quality goes, like I noticed right away that it's pretty good. Like there are some pretty established channels out there that may not even be up to the level that yours is. So like how do you account for that? Is it something you do all yourself or do you have help with that or how does that work?
Okay, so it's kind of a funny story. So initially, my girlfriend and I were just doing it on our own. So if you look at the first 4 or 5 videos, that was just me and my girlfriend stumbling through, trying to figure it out. And largely, I was just looking at people who already had YouTubes. I was looking at some of the people who had channels that were a bit smaller, maybe in the 4,000 to 5,000 range. And some people are like, 100,000 plus. And I was just looking at their videos, trying to see what it is that they were doing, how they were approaching the subjects, and then trying to just recreate that. But as far as like the production goes, it was just my girlfriend recording and then trying to figure out how to edit it properly on Adobe. But since then, I decided, look, like the amount of time it's going to take for you to get to a certain level of proficiency in order for us to make really high quality videos is going to be a long time. And I'm trying to make this channel as high quality as possible in the shortest period of time. So what I've since done is I've actually employed a videographer, at least for the last 6-7 videos, which is a bit costly, but I think it is part of the reason for a step up in the quality of the content. A lot of the videography is not done by my girlfriend. It's done by the videographer.
Before we like switch out of kind of talking about sort of the back end of this, like, do you see a little bit of a progressive increase in your audience following as time has gone on here? Like I noticed, it seems like you're getting more and more feedback on videos and responses and things. So like I see your Instagram posts where you're showing some of those people who've reached out and things like that, commenting on your content. So I would hope that you're starting to see a little bit of a uptick at this point?
Yeah, I definitely am. I would say that the uptick usually follows after a particular type of video. It just seems like on YouTube, there's a particular kind of content that people are seeking. And it seems to me like the posts that are most popular are the reviews. So most of the videos, if you look at mine in terms of like the views that they've gotten, the ones that are most popular are the reviews. So that explains why there's kind of been an uptick, because at first I think I was just kind of like fumbling and I was just trying to see like putting myself out there, trying to see like, okay, well, what do people respond to? What do they like? And I noticed that was a thing that they really enjoyed.
I think that's how I found you initially. I'm pretty sure was looking for a review of something. I think it was something Spier Mackay. And I think one of your videos came up somehow. So I think it went from there. That's how I kind of discovered you. And then I don't even know how we linked up on Instagram and just started communicating with some DMs just because I saw some stuff you were doing, thought it was interesting. We went back and forth, struck up a conversation, and here we are. So I guess I would ask you, though, to step back is, you had this interest in creating this content, but like the interest itself in fashion is what's interesting in terms of like what kicked that off? When did that start? And kind of how would you even maybe describe like your journey in fashion that way? I know like everyone kind of has a point where that got kicked off somehow, either through like friends or something about culturally what you were into that made you go down that road and get into the minutia of it and the nuance. So Yeah, I guess just tell me a little bit about that if you can, if there's something that sticks out to you about how you got sparked.
Yeah, it's a little bit ironic because I think if you ask most people about my style up until about 5 years ago, they probably would have very little, if anything, to say, which is because I didn't spend a lot of time investing in my appearance. So for most of my, I would say, early adulthood, I probably wore a range of like five things, mostly included like black shirts, black skinny jeans, and then like slippers or loafers or even sneakers. And so what happened for me is that I realized that, and this is partly through watching Real Men, Real Style. I don't know if you're familiar with that channel.
Yep.
I was watching the Real Men, Real Style videos, and he was talking about Antonio, I think his name is. He was talking about how people can use style as a vehicle to help get better career outcomes. And so I was just starting to, I think I was teaching at that point for a year or so. And so I was getting classes regularly. I was starting to make a little bit more money. So I had the excess income to invest in style if I wanted to. So I thought, I'll go ahead and give it a try. And I began just very, very naively. I just started buying things on the internet, more or less. I saw that people who were dressed well wore sport coats. And so I went on to Amazon, typed in sport coat. And one of the brands that came up was Kufandi. I don't know if you are familiar with them.
I have no idea. No.
That's probably for the better.
Yeah.
But they make $50 to $60 sport coats. And so I just bought like 5 or 6 of them in a variety of colors. And I started wearing those with jeans to my classroom. And so I started noticing that I was starting to get attention from people, but it seemed like, for me personally, it was like, I still don't understand like why certain clothes are working and why they aren't. Like some people would point out, they might say something in a very, how do I put it? A very indirect way that what I was wearing didn't look good. Or I would hear people chatter about what I was wearing, and I would interpret it negatively. And so I was like, I don't think I really, really understand what's going on here. So I started following people who were really popular with style on Instagram, like, for example, Dapper Classic. And I started looking at his outfits and looking at the brands that he was purchasing them from. And so I just started to try to study in a very informal way and ask myself, like, well, what is it about these outfits that are working? And then I became kind of like obsessed with it, because it almost seemed like there was a game at work to a certain extent, and there were rules, but I didn't have access to those rules. So it became almost like a little game for me. I'm like trying to figure out, well, what makes this outfit work, this color, this pattern combination. Started to become obsessed with it. And then I started to invest in. As I've gone on and purchased more and more items and started to learn more and more, it just continues to increase. And I kind of feel a little bit like Socrates, in that the more that I learn, the less I realize that I don't know, or the more I realize that I don't know, I should say.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to that. So I guess I would ask maybe some brands that stick out to you. I mean, you mentioned the one there, which I can't even remember already.
Kufandi.
Okay. So like for me, I think that one of the first brands that I kind of just found and went into, just because it was like, Ask Andy About Clothes, that forum. I don't know if you've ever
I've not heard of that.
Okay. So that's like, I would say, you mentioned Antonio, Real Men, Real Style. There's like Ask Andy About Clothes. There's some of these, I would call them like the pillars of the original online menswear community that are kind of still out there. And I think just from reading some of those things and watching videos like the ones you're talking about, obviously Brooks Brothers was something that popped up pretty quickly when you start looking into things. So going to the Brooks Brothers website and just perusing what's there, and then realizing, oh, wow, this place has been around a while. And then I think it just starts you down a path where you just want to learn about it. And I think for me, that was sort of a thing that got me just hooked on wanting to learn and understand like that there's this deep history, and it, we're going way back to Beau Brummel and England, and we're the origination of the suit, and then kind of following that track and like figuring out like what looks good, why does it look good, and then to play with it and to find what you like. And it seems like you're doing that, and you're still doing it. And it seems like your Instagram channel is sort of about your current journey and kind of where that is at the moment, and you're playing with different things. Like I noticed you have had some like Seinfeld inspiration lately. So you're like hearkening back to this like 90s aesthetic and things like that. So do you feel like you're going to continue to do that? Or do you think you're going to find like my look and your look and just stick with one thing? Or do you think that there's an end point, or how does that look to you?
Yeah, that's a very interesting, almost philosophical question. It's like, does somebody ever achieve style? Does somebody ever achieve that end result? It reminds me of a video I was watching yesterday, actually. I think the YouTube channel is Sartorial Talks. Have you heard of it?
I have not. No. Sartorial Talks. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good channel. And I was watching a video on sprezzatura, and I think that the question was, what is sprezzatura? And the guy was trying to answer that question. He give a clear definition, but then he tried to like philosophically grasp what sprezzatura is. And he was just kind of saying, I don't think anybody is able to achieve sprezzatura, but they strive to, so it's kind of like, it almost feels a little bit like the question, like, like knowledge, like we can strive to attain knowledge or wisdom, but will we ever get there? So I think, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I just think that's when I hear sprezzatura, my initial response is like, that's a cool guy in Italy that I can never be. That's what I think. But I mean, I think there's like a whimsicality to it. Maybe like it's being able to add elements that maybe doesn't make sense at first. When you look closer, maybe it does, like that kind of thing. Like a nonchalance or something like that. But I think that you've done some things lately, and you've talked about some things where I guess you're doing that. You're incorporating elements that may not seem like they should fit, but you're taking them and running with them. And I think you're also showing that you're trying to like go out on a limb and be a little bit brave with some of the combinations you're putting together. And it sounds like you're also very self-conscious about it. Like, is it approval that you're seeking from others, or is it that you're trying to find a look that you feel good about yourself? Like what is it that you're trying to get, I would say, out of when you put an outfit together? Do you want to look good yourself, or try to impress other people, or both?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to ask. It's like, I think I did a video a while back where I was asking the question, should you dress for yourself or others, which was addressed in another newsletter. But I would say that I'm trying to walk classically somewhere in between. I don't consider myself to be a dandy. I don't dress just for myself. Otherwise, I would probably dress a bit more extravagant than I do. I think that there is a mediation you have to go through in your style, right? I work in a particular environment, and I can't just go wearing anything into that environment because of the opinions of the people that I work with. Yeah. Even outside of work, that kind of like carries over. But I think that I'm more interested in the art itself. Like if you're asking like, well, what is your fundamental motivation? Like what drives you to dress well? I, of course, like anybody else, I like when people enjoy the way that I dress. That said, I don't fundamentally do it for that. I do it because it's pleasurable to try to fit outfits together. And I like working with it and experimenting with it and trying to, it sounds a little bit odd, but intensify my experience. So like somebody who dresses intentionally and they try to create a certain effect with their outfits, I just think that makes their everyday life even more vital and interesting, if you will. Like if I didn't take time to consider how it is that I dress, I feel like my days would be considerably more dull. I think that this is a way to kind of make myself, so to speak, an ornament on the world, which I have said it at.
Than try to go from point A to point B with just getting through the day, it's like one thing that you can kind of control and shape and take some pride in and enjoy a bit.
Yeah, and make it just more interesting, make everyday life more interesting.
I think that's fair. Now, I'm sure there's going to be someone out there that will hear this discussion or look at it and be like, but it's COVID times, guys. Like, why are you doing this? I mean, you could wear pretty much anything you want and no one would care. And I wear whatever, no one's going to even see me. I can just be on my Zoom call with audio only and the video is off and my boss will never know. Like, what what would you say to someone who would criticize over that, or even say like, why would you spend money on that? I mean, you could be spending that money in so many other ways. What is it that is it truly like an appreciation almost for an art form that, anyone that would say that they're into music would justify their expenses that way? Like, is that how you would kind of cast it? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I would say, well, I point out, first of all, that I'm not in a situation that many people are in. So at the beginning stages of the pandemic, like most people, I was forced to teach my classes online. So I will say initially, like many people, I tried to be brave and stand up to the times and try to present myself as best as possible over Zoom. But like many people, that enthusiasm very quickly wore off. And I succumbed to the same, what shall we call it, slovenliness that most people did, wearing kind of whatever was comfortable to my Zoom
happens
classes.
with me 80% of the time, I have to admit. So,
but since then, I've started teaching classes in person again. So my style journey started a couple years before the pandemic. And so it's, how do I put it? It started a couple years before the pandemic. And so it was able to ride itself out through the pandemic. And now I've gone back to teaching in person, but for somebody who is at this point in time entirely secluded to teaching or doing their job online, I would have a very difficult time mounting a defense of dressing well, because I think that there isn't that particular motivation to do it. And as I said, I've had a hard time doing it myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think sometimes dressing well also can bleed over into these other things where you have an appreciation for fine fabrics and I would say, precision tailoring, things like that. So you often find that people who are interested in menswear are also interested in cars or interested in watches or even like the whole like James Bond aesthetic. Like, it's almost comical at this point, but like, what's your take on that? Do you have do you feel like you're pulled into those directions also and are interested in those things, or does that not interest you at all? And it's more about the clothes.
What things in particular are you talking about?
Like, would you be interested in, so quote unquote, like the James Bond aesthetic at all? Like, does that, the whole like the tuxedo and the special bourbon or something, like, does that pull you in, and having to have the certain watch, like a specific model year Omega?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I would say no, in that I'm not so much interested in the attire per se that James Bond wears, but I do love James Bond, the character. But what attracts me most to him is not a particular article that he wears. It's rather the what he exemplifies, which seems to me to be masculinity. So I'm very, very attracted to that aspect of his character, and I strive in my own person to try to be like that, at least in the best sense. I'm very attracted to someone who can dress really, really well, who can speak elegantly and confidently, but at the same time, like can whoop ass. I like that. I like that aspect. I also like the idea of someone who is just kind of like, as a man, being kind of worldly, if that makes sense. Same way that James Bond is.
And you know what? You just teed something up. You said someone that kicks ass, and you participate in Muay Thai, right? That's something that you've been refining for a while.
Yeah. I actively train Muay Thai. I would say that the gym that I train at, it's not, how do I put it? It's not traditional Muay Thai. I would say it's broadly striking, but it has a very heavy influence of Muay Thai. Okay.
And I am out of my depths when it comes to talking about fighting. I know nothing about it, which is probably evident in the way that I asked that question. But I was wondering, I guess, do you think also play into the way that you decide to carry yourself and want to look? Because it's like, if you're making sure that you're fit, that you're eating right, maintaining a certain weight kind of thing, like that lends itself well, I would say, to dressing well. Because one of the things that I think is underrated, underappreciated in dressing well is that if you have a stable body and a stable weight, or at least a range that it kind of stays within, it makes it a lot easier to dress well, because you're not having to buy new things that you already, like you don't want to have 7 Navy sport coats in different sizes because you can't control yourself. So,
you definitely don't want to take it to the tailor 7 times. That'll be costly.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I've actually I've done that myself, just going through like the young adulthood into early fatherhood. Like I've had to buy a couple different sizes here. I think I've gone anywhere from size 42 up to the size 46. So kind of I fluctuate in that range, and unfortunately got rid of a lot of my smaller stuff. So that's like almost a weight that keeps me in that larger size, where it's like, I don't want to lose weight. If I lose weight, I'm going to have to buy all these new clothes. Now it's like keeping me fat. That's my excuse anyway. So
yeah, I have kind of like the opposite, because I like, as soon as I feel myself, because I'll start to put on some pounds if I don't actively train. And then I start to notice my high rise trousers, they start to get a bit tighter. And I'm like, this is not happening. I'm not paying to take these to the tailor, and I'm not buying another pair of these trousers. I got to get back in the gym.
Well, I think some of this does concern me when it comes to like, as far as what becomes culturally acceptable in the future, when we come back, hopefully, from this sort of COVID madness stuff, and people return to a workplace, at least even if it's a few days a week, let's say in some white collar jobs. Will people's weight change and just routines that have shifted now lend itself to even worse dressing than before, which was already pretty bad? Because I think people like you and I that would try to go to work at least in a shirt, a sport coat, tie, and then either nice pants or even dark jeans and nice shoes, like we would stick out a little bit, I'd say. Like you already were noticed as someone who probably tried to take that seriously. And now if you do that amongst a crowd that went even further down the rabbit hole of, the perpetual gingham shirt and the sleeveless button up, what is that going to be? I mean, I'm kind of scared about it. It's going to be like they're going to think we're these strange aristocrats or something, which was already like a concern like before, where you didn't want to feel like you were trying to portray something you weren't. It's just an aesthetic you like. But now it might even feel a little bit more costumey. And that's something that I personally worry about a little bit, because it's like, I don't want to look like I'm in a costume. It's not Halloween. We're going to work. So yeah, I guess that's not, I'm hoping out loud that it doesn't get worse. But what do you think? Do you think it gets worse, or do you think that there's going to be a renaissance of people who care?
A renaissance of style. I have to say that I'm probably more cynical than I ought to be. In general, I'm quite cynical. So I suspect that, and I've already started to notice this, at least for my students, even with my students. Now, obviously, my students never were, most of them anyway, well-dressed. But yeah. I've noticed that the majority of them now are even less well-dressed. Like even for them to put on a t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of sneakers is kind of going a little bit far. Most of them are wearing, what is the correct term? Bedclothes. They're wearing bedclothes to class, and it's a little bit ironic because they're showing up in bedclothes and I'm still showing up like this because that's what I'm going to do. I suspect that it's going to become increasingly more and more, I want to say slovenly, but I don't want to put the moral connotation on it necessarily. I suspect that there's going to be even a more laid back approach to dressing, but I think that also could present interesting opportunities for combinations. A lot of the stuff that we would consider to be Ivy and be people who, dress Ivy would be well-dressed now. At the particular point in time when it started, they would probably be looked on as slovenly. So I'm curious what chimera, so to speak, is going to come out of this particular period, whether there's going to be this interesting combination with sportswear, casual wear, and tailoring. I'm curious to see what's going to come out of that, but I don't want to go so far as to predict.
It does seem like some of the pretty established brands are starting to veer in that direction, where they're offering casualized tailoring. That's, they've taken all the structure out of things. They've used more, I would just say country style or just, what's the word for it? Just fabrics that are not wool, let's just say. So I think, you're seeing colors too that are more interesting. So, yeah, maybe that will be the direction that that stuff goes. And at least there will be a place for people who have a more of a thought process like you and I do about it. And, you can still exist in the future without feeling like you're just in bedclothes, and that seems like a really depressing place to be.
I believe so. I mean, I've spent a little bit too much money on clothes to to go back to bed clothes.
Yeah, it's like you'll go down as the violinist on the Titanic, I think, at that point when you spent that much money. I wouldn't want to know if do you have any idea? That's actually kind of an interesting. I don't know if you're willing to broach that subject, but how much you'd say you'd budget for clothes in any given year. It does. I guess it's not that important, but I would imagine that it's more than a lot of people who have a similar income. Let's say, do you feel like you probably spend more on clothes than someone with a similar income to you?
Yeah, most certainly.
So,
and I say that somewhat coyly. I almost don't want to admit it.
What have you had to sacrifice then in order to do it? Do you think? Like, do you feel like you've in some ways shorted yourself in some other area that you sometimes are like, man, I wish I'd spent a little more money on this or save money so I could go golfing. I don't know, whatever it might be.
I've had to sacrifice my soul. No, I'm just kidding. To be honest, I've made enough money in the last couple of years that it hasn't been an issue. I am the kind of person that I don't have extravagant hobbies. So I don't travel very much. It's not that important to me, at least at this particular stage in my life. And most of the things that I do as far as hobbies are not costly. Reading and writing, shooting YouTube videos, except for paying the videographer, of course, training Muay Thai. Like I don't have a lot of extravagant hobbies. So
the overhead is not so crazy.
It's not too much of an issue. I will say that I have splurged over the last 2 years, but my justification was that I was setting up my wardrobe. And now I think I'm going to start to taper off a bit more and be even more selective than I already was and just try to get like particular pieces for particular reasons. Like I went through a stage where it's like excess. I'm sure like many men who get involved in menswear, they have that period, which is like, get everything. And, initially you don't really have a clear idea of what it is that you need to start off your wardrobe and why it is that you're incorporating those particular pieces into it. But now I think I have enough of a basis where it's like I can be a little bit more choosy and I don't need to buy 5 sport coats in one season. Like if I get one sport coat a season, that would one or none probably would be sufficient at this point because I have so many.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a kind of an interesting question then. What do you think will be the next piece that you'll purchase that you might want to do a review on or something like that really interests you? Is there anything out there that you're currently considering?
Yeah, I have a backlog of stuff that I need to do reviews on, to be honest. But I've just noticed in myself that I'm trying to, as best as possible, focus on parts of my wardrobe that I consider to be lacking. So as of late, I purchased quite a bit of trousers. So I probably in the last maybe 3 to 5 months, I've probably purchased 5 or 6 pairs of trousers because I felt like I was lacking in that element. And in particular, I've gotten a lot of denim for whatever reason. But I think going forward, like if I look at my wardrobe and what it needs in order to be even more complete, I think I need to focus in on shirts. And I become really enamored with Coloro, which is a MTM made to measure company. And I had them actually make a shirt for me that was a cream and navy striped shirt. Incredible piece. So I do want to do a review on that piece. And I think going forward, I'm going to try more and more to incorporate custom made shirts into my wardrobe.
Okay, cool. Nice. As far as I haven't seen you do much on footwear. I have noticed that you've shown that you wear white socks with black loafers. I obviously noticed that. And that seems to be not like a crazy uncommon thing. That's a pretty much an Ivy staple. But what about footwear? Is there anything in that space? I see a little bit of it behind you there. So is there a brand that you go to or?
Yeah, I would say that that's another part of my wardrobe that is lacking at the moment. Okay. Yeah. Most of my outfits right now are white socks and black loafers. I've kind of fallen in love with that. I'm sure that'll be a passing moment.
You
I
know
don't think
what?
I'll ever.
That can be good, I think, because it does save you money, especially if you have a pair that fits you well, that looks nice, and you take care of it, and it goes with a lot of outfits. Then it's like, that's, if you can not have to spend there, that's nice. You can put that into something else or save up for a really great version of what you already have, right?
Yeah, it's just an extremely versatile combination. I've noticed that in about 90% of my outfits, white socks and black loafers will work. There are outfits where it won't work. So obviously you have to be aware of that. But yeah, for the most of them, it does work. But again, I'm kind of lacking in that section of my wardrobe. I do have a pair of Grant Stone suede tassel loafers that I haven't worn in a while, but that is an incredible pair of shoes. I've also started to, sorry, go ahead.
Are they brown or black?
Yeah, they're dark brown.
Dark brown. Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely classic. So I'm sure they're nice.
Yeah. And then lately I've started to invest a little bit more in kind of like casual stuff. So I purchased a couple pairs of sneakers, purchased some Vans. It kind of hurt me to do that because I'm kind of like I'm coming out of a phase where it's like, I think I was trying to achieve something of that like English, I don't know what the correct English countryside style or something.
Yeah,
like almost always sport coats, trousers, dress shirt, tie or not a tie. And now I'm starting to like include more casual things into my wardrobe. And it almost hurts me to do it, oddly. Like it really hurt me to spend $50 to buy a pair of sneakers. And like what was going on in my head at the time, I'm like, I could spend this on a tie. And it's like, I have 100 ties.
Fox Brothers sport coat right now, right? So
yeah,
a $50 pair of those shoes probably feels, like a step down or something. But yeah, it's about the aesthetic. It doesn't always have to be hugely expensive or anything. And have you ever heard of Jake Grantham, by the way?
I have not.
He's the Anglo-Italian guy. Have you ever heard of that brand?
Oh, no. I didn't know it was a brand. I thought you were talking about a person, but no, I haven't.
So Jake Grantham, and I think he has a buddy, he and a friend got together and created this company called Anglo-Italian. And I think you'd really like that aesthetic if you checked it out. And actually, you have a similar sort of look to Jake. He's a redheaded guy from England. But yeah, it's an interesting shop. I think you might be interested in it. I think it's up your alley is what I'm trying to say. So
I'll definitely have to check it out.
Although I have not purchased anything from them and I've never owned a piece of clothing from them. So I'm just throwing it out there because I just feel like you would be on the similar wavelength. But it's expensive.
This interview is not sponsored by them.
That's correct. Yeah, no, it's expensive stuff. It's not like it's cheap or anything. That's the main reason I haven't purchased anything, because I'm just looking at the prices and I'm like, I can get similar stuff elsewhere for a little bit less. And I'm just not willing to like take a leap on something that I'd have to send back overseas and deal with all that. But anyway, yeah, I just thought I'd have to point that one out to you. Do you know The Armory by chance?
I became recently familiar with them. I saw I don't know if you follow I hate the word influencer, so I'm just going to say enthusiast. Yeah. That's another conversation for another day. But Ethan Wong, do you follow him?
Yep. He has a pretty popular menswear blog or podcast, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he also does I think they call it what is it? Style and Direction, I think is the name.
Style and Direction. Yep. He has a podcast called the same thing, and he has a blog by the same name, I think.
Yeah, but he posted yesterday that there was a particular tie from that company that apparently his mom had purchased for him for Christmas, but it was the first time I'd heard of the brand, and I actually clicked on there and was like looking through some of their stuff, but it might be a little bit out of my price range.
Yeah, I think when I see that place, I always think like it's like, I don't know, up and coming lawyers in New York or something that are spending money on that stuff. Probably. I don't know. It's really nice stuff, but I can't fathom spending like a full paycheck on a few different things there. You get 2 or 3 things and it's like, that's the month's budget. So, I mean,
yeah, although I have to be honest, because there's a period you kind of go through when you get involved in menswear where you almost have to you have to go past a certain threshold. Like, I was, when I first started off, of course, I was buying those Kufandy blazers for $50, $60. And like, I remember at that time becoming aware of Spier Mackay and looking at their sport coats and going, $400 for a sport coat? I'm never going to purchase a sport coat for $400. And then I'm like, trousers for $150? That is insane. There's no way I'll ever spend that. And here we are, 10 pairs of trousers and 15 sport coats later. So
yeah, that sometimes is also another thing that I wonder about my own self, where it's like, if I just had a little bit more self-control sometimes and didn't, just buy a couple things in quantity because I'm thinking, oh, it's cheaper. It's only $150 versus that $350 pair of trousers. It's like, if I just didn't buy that $150 pair and waited 3 more months, I could get that really awesome pair. But if something in my brain won't allow me to do that sometimes, it's like I just can't seem to get past those thresholds with certain items where I can fathom spending $300 or $400 on a pair of pants.
I have the exact same issue. I go through the exact same thing. I'm like, well, if I, those trousers, that sport coat's $400. That's like, oh, I can't spend $400 on a sport coat. But then, over a period of 2 or 3 months, I'll spend $400 total on trousers, albeit over time. I'm like, did I really even need those? And couldn't I just save that money and bought that one thing? But it's just like I think it's just, once again, there's that threshold, that amount in your head all at one time is frightening, because you don't really calculate how much you're spending over time so much as like at that one period of time.
And for me, less so for you, but I've got a baby who will wipe spaghetti sauce all over me. So that's the other thing. I'm not going to go do that. And then, some of my clothes right now just hang in the closet because I'm like, I can't take these out while she's in this stage of life. No way. I'm going to let that stuff just sit there until she's mature, and then I'll be able to wear my good stuff again. So
that's understandable. I have a dog, which is my child.
Okay.
And
does he want to put his nose on everything too? Does that ever start happening?
He is a spaniel, so he wants to smell and sniff everything. That's not so much the issue, but he also sheds quite a bit. And so add that to the fact that he is quite excitable. So anytime he gets really excited, he likes to jump up on you. And, thankfully my dog understands what no means. Otherwise, I'd have a bunch of hair all over everything.
Yeah, it'd be lint rolling for days.
I understand the concern.
That's rough. Oh man. Well, I think you've probably put a lot of stuff out there now that I'm guessing people will be interested in hearing. So hopefully someone gets something out of this.
I hope so.